صلى عليه الله ربي وعلى صحابه وآله ومن تلا. عليه الله ربي وعلى صحابه وآله ومن تلا. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تلا. So today's narrations are 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We are going to cover 40 narrations as we discussed, and they range from the legal issues, the ethical issues, and all different types of things that relate to marriage. It's not just restricted to people who are married. For those who are looking to get married, for those who have been married, I've covered every single topic from divorce to khuln, when a woman seeks separation. We're doing narrations based on that as well, covering that topic, as well as before marriage, what are the different things that a person can do, how to understand those situations properly, of how to be a suitor, the different normatives that we see today, socially speaking, different things that allow certain cultural tendencies to be taken as religious teachings, etc. And what's the answers to the problems or the difficulties that one faces in marriage in general. So we covered a few narrations on different things, and I mentioned a few points related to them. The main thing, obviously, the core of it, the crux of it, is to go through the prophetic teachings, as well as understanding how the Prophet ﷺ has introduced and left the concept or the institution of marriage among us as Muslims. Because marriage is a religious concept according to us, according to Muslims, and needs to be followed, or it needs to be in line with the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Hadith 11, we did 10 before in the previous classes, it's quite interesting. And a short disclaimer before we begin is that some of the narrations may seem a bit quote-unquote explicit, that what we're discussing, and I will be explaining them with a lot of explicitity as well. Just not because of the fact that there are certain inclinations or because of our Western atmosphere, etc. It's just because we will take it as it is, without any sprinkles of culturalism or anything, just unfiltered narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, so you understand the true message behind it. Something that is a lot of times missed on not just regular people, but even students of knowledge that later become preachers or scholars, and they're not able to fully relay the meaning that is found in certain narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. They lose the essence of it. They're not able to understand it fully. I will focus on that, and I will back it up with linguistic proofs as well as contextual proofs to show that this meaning is also signified or denoted by the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. And also pose questions to you. So those some of the narrations and some of the content related to the narrations would be slightly more explicit than what we've discussed so far, but there's nothing wrong with that, right? Even if it relates to people's desires. There is a misconception among people that every form of desire is considered to be problematic, right? The Quran does not accept this. The Quran says, "But اتبع الذين ظلموا أهواءهم بغير علم." Rather, the ones who have been oppressive, or the ones who have done things that are not supposed to be done, right? Dhulm literally means that, and it's referring to the mushrikun here during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the ones who have opposed God in from monotheism to every single thing that they're supposed to be following. They have done that by following their desires بغير علم, without knowledge. Without knowledge. What does that mean? You think about it. Many times you heard this narrative, which is to some extent correct, that knowledge plus misguidance is worse than misguidance on its own. So you can be ignorant and you're misguided. That's not as bad as knowing and being misguided, right? But Allah Ta'ala here says that they're the ones who followed ahwa'ahum their desires بغير علم. What's the opposite of it? Like they're being criticized for following their desires without knowledge. Now the question comes that, okay, if following your desires with knowledge is worse, why are they being criticized here? Why is it being pointed out that without knowledge they're following their desires? Obviously it's worse, right? And if it's the same, then why is it being pointed out? But you cannot have the opposite narrative here. Makes sense. That no, it's actually with knowledge that would have been more problematic to follow your desires. No, they were criticized. The mushrikun, the zalimun were criticized that they are following desires without proper knowledge. So the knowledge that came down to the Prophet ﷺ, that included everything. Your main focus is to please God and be devoted to God, but there are certain desires that are permitted by God and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if you put a cap on it and you say that those are not desires, they are in essence desires. Loving someone is also something that is within the folds of desire, right? It could be loving your mother, it could be loving your father, it could be, as long as the politeness connected to or the lack of subconscious lewdness is negated, or so the lack of like it's present, the lewdness that is associated with loving a female that you're not directly related to, for example, so falling in love, or loving someone in a way that you would like to get married to them, being sexually attracted to someone else. These are all considered to be negative things essentially or on their own. But the Prophet's teachings, alayhi salam, like were not like this. Rather, they taught us to channel these energies or these desires bi'ilm, towards something that is based on or in line with prophetic knowledge. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So whatever is being told here and whatever you understand of the Prophet ﷺ's mentioning of desires, following them, attaining them, acquiring them, and even fulfilling them, right? In the right manner, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It should not be understood with the, with the underlying, subconsciously believing that, well, these are things that are only permitted, right? So you can maybe, it's okay to do it only. No, it actually says, why don't you do it? As you would see. So let's look at the first narration and you would see that the things that are pointed out here, that's what really defines, that's one of the things that define a Islamic marriage. And that is missed out on a lot of people many times. It's about intimacy and amusement in marriage itself. Amusement that is between the husband and the wife, and intimacy that is sexual or non-sexual, all sorts. So it is narrated from Jabir radiallahu anhu, عن جابر بن عبد الله قال هلك أبي وترك 9 بنات. My father passed away and he left 9 daughters. Right? So that's 9 sisters for Jabir. فتزوجت امرأة. So after that I married a woman after the passing of his father. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تزوجت يا جابر. The Prophet عليه السلام asked Jabir رضي الله عنه that you got married? Oh Jabir, like Jabir, did you get married? قلت نعم. He said yes. قال بكرا أو ثيبا. The Prophet عليه السلام asked him تزوجت بكرا أو أم ثيبا. Did you marry a female that was never married before, or did you marry a female that was married before? The word thayyib is applicable to any female that was married before, right? She could be a widow, she could be quote unquote separated, she could be divorced, however you understand. Separation through khul, for example, for those people who do not consider khul to be talaq itself, which is a stronger wire from Ahmed. بكرا أم ثيبا قلت ثيبا. Jabir radiallahu anhu, he responded and said that she has been married. She was married before, right? قال, the Prophet ﷺ responded to this after hearing this from Jabir. هلا جارية تلاعبها وتلاعبك. Why did you not get married to a younger female? تلاعبها, a female that you can quote unquote be playful with, right? And you see the translation that I brought forward, I've said being playfully intimate, right? So the elements of intimacy is also understood with mula'abah, as I will clarify when I mention the different recensions later on. تلاعبها وتلاعبك. أو تضاحكها وتضاحكك. Or you play with her in a way that you would make her laugh and she would make you laugh. Or she would play with you in a way that she would make you laugh and you would make her laugh. The reason why it's so repetitive is because mula'aba or mudahaka already tells you of the action being conducted or performed from both sides. So the initiation here is the one that is being targeted. So the nisbah of the fa'il, that is the attribution towards the doer of the action, is understood first and foremostly, and then you understand the meaning of the object. So تلاعبها, you are playing with her while she's playing with you, and she is playing with you while you're playing with her. So it's been emphasized through the initiator being pointed out as the male or the female, right? قلت, Jabir radiallahu anhu, he responded, هلك أبي. He clarified why did he get married to someone who was previously married to. He said, my father passed away, فترك 9 بنات. My father passed away and he left 9 daughters. In some recensions it says 7 daughters, but 9 is the riwayah that is the strongest, right? فكرهت أن أجيئهن بمثلهن. And I was not in favor, or I disliked, or I didn't deem appropriate that I bring to them a female that is exactly like them. So they were unmarried, they had not previously married, so I wanted someone mature to come after the passing away of my father in the household. فَتَزَوَّجْتُ مِرْأَةً تَقُومُ عَلَيْهِنَّ. Therefore, I married a female who would be able to be their guardian with me, or be a caretaker over them. Right? قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, after Jabir radiallahu anhu clarified this, he said, فَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ. Then may Allah bless your marriage, right? Or may Allah bless you for taking this decision. The first and foremost point is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with getting married to a female that was previously married or not, right? So just as here the Prophet ﷺ asked Jabir radiallahu anhu, that why did you not get married to someone who was not married previously? He also said, فَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ, after he explained that this is the reason, this is why I got married to someone who was previously married. So technically, Islam encourages both, but there is more encouragement in getting married to a female that was not previously married. But as you would see, the word that was used here was jarah, someone who was younger, right? So thayyib, because of their, the way their society worked, women would get married younger, right? So it would be imagined that someone who was previously married would not be that young. That's why تلاعبها وتلاعبك, someone can argue and say that, well, you can be playfully intimate with someone who's older too, someone who was previously married as well, if she's young. That's the main factor. So someone older, he gets married to someone younger, or someone younger gets married to someone younger. The main thing is the mula'aba and the mudahaka. The fact that you have amusement, you're amusing each other, and you are being intimate and playful with each other. That's the main thing that was being targeted. If someone has other priorities in marriage, while that is also not disregarded, then it's completely fine for that person to find someone who is more mature and does mula'aba, does mudahaka, does these two things that I mentioned, right? Mula'aba means to be playfully intimate, and mudahaka means like to play around, make the other person laugh, or make each other laugh, joke around, right? But you have to prioritize and see which ones make sense. But both of them have been okayed in this narration by the Prophet ﷺ. One with a strong recommendation, because generally speaking, as well as in light of other narrations that come from the Prophet ﷺ, there is more emphasis in marrying a female that was not previously married, right? But within the Sunnah, the fold of Sunnah, as I clarified before, the Sunnah is a lot more wider of a circle than people imagine it to be. It's not that binary a lot of times. Over here, what would be the Sunnah according to him? It would be both, because the Prophet ﷺ is giving him an approval for both of them. When the Prophet ﷺ is asking him, why did you not get married to someone younger? That means that his approval is there, right? And then when he told him that I got married to someone who was older because I wanted someone to take care of my sisters too with me, because my father passed away, he said, فَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ, he approved of that as well. Both of them are with the approval of the Prophet ﷺ. So which one is considered to be sunnah? Both of them are considered to be sunnah. So you see your own priorities and you choose according to that. And our societal like standards that have made it a lot more difficult for people to get married. Once they have been married before, there's absolutely no such thing. The Prophet ﷺ himself blessed a marriage in which the female was previously married. Right? That means it is something that is open to, prone to blessings that are religious that come to you. Now let's look at a few of the recensions that I've brought here. Al-Bukhari wa Muslim, this narration itself is sound. It's narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. وَاللَّفْظُ لِلْأَوَّلِ, and the wording over here that I've used is the wording of Bukhari's Sahih. And then وَفِي رِوَايَةٍ Muslim, عفوا, Ya Rasulullah, in the recension of Muslim, it's mentioned that Jabir radiallahu anhu, he said, Ya Rasulullah, إِنَّ لِي أَخَوَاتٍ فَخَشِيتُ أَن تَدْخُلَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَهُمْ. That I have sisters, and I feared that that younger female that I would actually bring into the family or the household, she would come between me and my sisters. Not necessarily in fights, and so it would keep me more occupied than an older female that would help me in taking care of them a lot more. So because of the fact that he is not actually disinclined from the mula'aba and the mudahaka that we were talking about, right? He wants to be playfully intimate. He wants to be amused and also amuse his partner. But he said that, well, you know what, that will distract me from the other duty that I have right now because of the passing away of my father. Not because of the fact that he would say that, well, I'm more mature, so I would want to be mature too, on its own, without like an external factor. It seems like that you can understand that, well, he would have been okay with it if it was not this, right? But again, it's not that definite, so we can just assume that that would be the case. But it's definitely something that he was open to, right? Otherwise, the other explanation would have been like, because I wanted to. وفي رواية للبخاري, and there's another recension of al-Bukhari's Sahih, which is divided or subdivided into two parts, which is really interesting that the same moment has been related, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا لَكَ وَلِلْعَذَارَ وَلُعَابِهَا وَلِعَابِهَا. There are two recensions for it. One is the regular one that is preserved and transmitted to, and the other one is the Riwayah of Abu Dharr, which is one of the famous recensions of al-Bukhari Sahih, and they're also sound. Right? There is no clash between the two recensions. What do you understand from that? The Prophet ﷺ said, مَا لَكَ وَلِلْعَذَارَ. Al-'adhara refers to the ones that have never been married before as well. The abkar, right? The biks. So what is it with you and females that were not married before and playing around with them or being playful with them? Like, what is it? What's wrong with you? Why are you not interested? What is interesting is that the other recension, the recension of Abu Dharr from al-Bukhari, that has with the lam, with the dhamma of the lam, the lam with a dhamma has been related, which translates into what is it what is it that you don't like in younger females and their saliva? And Al-Qadi Iyad, as well as many others that talked about it, that this talks about being very strongly intimate, kissing, and as well as doing other things. So what's wrong with you? Why are you not actually comfortable with that? Is what the Prophet ﷺ asked him, according to the other recension. So the word lu'ab is actually there as well. Saliva has been mentioned. Why do you not enjoy that? Why would you not enjoy that? And some of the commentators have actually mentioned that because of the fact that the person would be younger, so it's a more emphatic focus on the physical aspect of intimacy, like being physical with your partner in a way that you would find it to be a lot more enjoyable. And people who are younger, they are a lot more into sexual intimacy than those who are not, right? Not necessarily applicable to every single person, because the youth is also kind of like relative, right, from this aspect. But definitely it's a riwayah that's worthy of consideration, that you say that the word lu'ab was specifically related from the Prophet ﷺ. Two other points that I would like to mention here, which makes you wonder about our societal standards that we have today. The first one, which is something that you might have missed out, is that Jabir got married and he didn't invite the Prophet ﷺ. Do you notice that? He got married, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him, "Did you get married?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like he does not even know about the girl. He said, "Well, was she someone previously married or not?" He's like, "Yes." Did he get angry at him? He said, "Well, how come I did not get invited to the nikah?" Absolutely not. There's no such thing. That this is actually making things more difficult. That whenever someone goes like, "Okay, I have to do a nikah," and in the nikah, he said, "Well, you have to make sure that it's a big party, that everyone gets invited, because a lot of people are going to be upset if they don't get invited. And can I actually afford that right now or not?" No, I can't. A lot of people actually go through this. They're like, "I cannot afford getting married right now." It's not the amount that they're focused on. It's actually the celebrations or the dinners or etc. that they're going to have, and the inviting of the important people, especially those who get offended that how come I was not told about it, how come I was not invited. The Prophet ﷺ, the best of the creation, who actually did not know about Jabir being married. He got married and he asked him, and he was not offended at all. In fact, he prayed for him. Barakallahu alayk. He asked him, "Who did you get married to?" And then he told him, he's like, "Okay, that's nice. May Allah bless you." There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Right? Is everyone understanding what I'm saying? The second thing is the fact that that's related after too, and I mean I already pointed out, but it was asked before we started as well. The zawj aspect of it, the pairing aspect of it, right? That doesn't refer to zawj whenever the Quran and Sunnah, when it talks about pairs, what does that mean? Does that necessarily refer to marriage or not? So the terminology of the Quran and Sunnah, that is the linguistics that were borrowed from the Arab culture, has always been that pairing has been understood. The zai, waw, jim has always been understood as coming together in a wedlock, zawj, right? So there is a generic understanding as to like, okay, everything partners with another thing. So things are in pairs, or this is a partner of that woman is a partner of this man, etc. But zawaj or tazawwuj is the word that's used here. As you would see, it says tazawwajta ya Jabir. How would you translate that? Did you find a pair? You said, did you get married? So the burden of proof is on the person who's saying that this would not include marriage when the word azwaj and zawj is used, right? Some proof needs to be provided. When it's being used for humans, you would immediately understand that it's going to refer to the generic understanding of being paired, and that includes the institution of marriage inside it, because Islam actually instilled that okay, when a man and a woman, they would like to get together, the only way they can get together is by getting married, marriage, right? So to negate that aspect of it, the burden of proof is on them, not on us, to prove that no, zawj will refer to necessarily getting married and not being pairs. No, they're not mutually exclusive. They can coexist, both of these. I hope that was clear. Alhamdulillah. Now, the next narration, that is Hadith 12, which is quite interesting as well, is from Sa'd ibn Waqas, and focuses on spending on your wives and your children, right? عن سعد بن أبي وقاص رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال له, it is narrated that the Prophet عليه السلام said to him, إنك مهما أنفقت على أهلك من نفقة. Right? For those who understand a bit of linguistics, the min nafaqa over here would be in place of umum. So the min is considered to be za'idah. And nafaqa over here is a ism, that is a common noun, sort of ism, not a wasf, and that comes and denotes the meaning understood from infaq, right? So it's ism masdar, nafaqa. It'll be in the place of this masdar, so ism mansub in terms of its mahal. So it's a lot more emphasis that's been given. So like any form of spending that you do on your family, any form of it, that's the point. Like it's extremely, extremely generic or general, right? فَإِنَّكَ تُؤْجَرُ فِيهَا, you will indeed be rewarded for it. حتى اللقمة, and this could be read both ways, حتى اللقمة أو حتى اللقمة ترفعها إلى في امرأتك. Even if it happens to be a morsel or a bite or a piece of food that you will raise towards the mouth of your wife. So this will make you understand that spending over here does not necessarily refer to money being used to spend or being given, handed over. That's just a part of it. Any form of tasarruf that's being done, any form of actions that are done in which some sort of spending that happens, spending the time that could be used to make money too is also included. Right? Generally speaking, even though the hadith does not directly target it, but you can understand from it that it will be including everything, right? So it can be tangible things, it could be things that are non-tangible as well. So anything that you were to spend. But I would say the direct madlul alayhi, that whatever is signified in this narration focuses on things that are tangible for sure, like money, food, anything that you give them, etc. But it will also, because of the fact that time is always connected to it, and time and being nice to them, which is that's an action, right? So you're not really necessarily over here, the feeding itself is not mentioned. Just the raising of it is mentioned. That's an action. So even actions would be a part of it. Dalalatan, that is. Are you guys understanding? Like it's inferred. It's not explicitly or directly understood from the text itself. It's definitely understood that you would spend, or spending on your wives and your children is considered to be something that you will be rewarded for. So it's not just to be taken as an obligation. Spending on your wives and your children is not just an obligation, and it should not be only be restricted to your obligations as well. So you would see in the other recensions that I've brought forth at the bottom, which I'll translate. First, I said that Allah Shaykhan wa Ahmed wa laqab al-akhir, that this has been narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim in their respective Sahihs, as well as Ahmed, rahmallah, in his Musnad with the sound chain, and the wording here is from Ahmed's Musnad. وروى أحمد بسند الرجال وثقات أنه قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that it is also related from Ahmed with a sound chain of transmission or chain of transmission Sanad that has narrators, they're all sound or all reliable, or trustworthy. But the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ma at'amta nafsak, fahuwa laka sadaqah." Whatever you feed yourself with, right? Or whenever you feed yourself, if the mind is considered to be in the ma'an of zaman, fahuwa laka sadaqah, then that is also a form of charity. وَمَا أَطْعَمْتَ وَلَدَكَ فَهُوَ لَكَ صَدَقَةٌ. That is also for a form of charity for you if you were to feed your children. Walad over here is a jins on the scale of fa'il. So male or females both would be included. وَمَا أَطْعَمْتَ زَوْجَتَكَ فَهُوَ لَكَ صَدَقَةٌ. Whatever you feed, now over here, feeding particularly has been mentioned. فَهُوَ لَكَ صَدَقَةٌ, and that's considered to be a sadaqah as well. وَمَا أَطْعَمْتَ خَادِمَكَ فَهُوَ لَكَ صَدَقَةٌ. And whatever you feed your employee, that is also considered to be a sadaqah. You will notice that there are many narrations of the Prophet ﷺ in which the employees are mentioned too, right? The khadims have been mentioned too. And they have been not just as rights, this is beyond rights. Whatever you feed them does not mean that when they're starving, you provide them with food. Not just the khadim, also the zawja, that is, again, the pair or the wife, as well as your children and yourself. That is also considered to be a sadaqah as well. With obviously the condition that it has to be from earnings that are 100% legit and halal. There's another recension of this, or a narration, sorry, that gives you more context or much more clarity on this, or just adds on to this, which also were related by Ahmed rahmallah in his Musnad with a sound chain, or sorry, with a strong chain. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Prophet alayhi salam, he encouraged to give charity. فقال رجل عندي دينار. So a man said that I have a dinar, which is a gold coin, right? قال تصدق به على نفسك. The Prophet ﷺ said to spend it on yourself. So you understand from this that spending on yourself is not considered to be problematic. It's not something that to be guilty about, right? The man said after that, عندي دينار آخر. I have another dinar. He's going to keep having dinars, right? He goes like, I got another gold coin. I don't know why he was revealing in a slow manner, but the Prophet ﷺ just responded to whatever was apparent and what he asked of him. قال تصدق به على زوجتك. Spend that on your wife. قال عندي دينار آخر. The man said that I have another dinar. Right? The third one. He's slowly going towards that. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet عليه السلام said, تصدق به على ولدك. Spend that on your children. قال عندي دينار آخر. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم تصدق به على خادمك. So this is how the narration is like similar to it, the one that is before this. That is, you see the order, spend on yourself, spend on your wife, spend on your children, or spend on your children, spend on your wife, right? And then at the very end, according to both recensions, the people that you've hired, that work for you. That could refer to the slaves that are owned by a person, obviously in a context where the slaves were owned. And it could also refer to khadim as a word that is general. So it could refer to those who are hired by you as well, right? Because there is a possibility that you said that even a person who is a slave, there is a point that he could be seeking emancipation through a contract. So he does quote unquote work for you at some point as well. So it's not really negating any rules, right? Anyone who serves you, khad, right? It could also refer to someone who's not an employee, but just serves you, right? There are ulama, there are people of knowledge, and there are other, elders who have khuddam because of the fact that they're not able to take care of themselves, right? Or there are people who just wish to take care of the people that they love, etc., or they would like to work for. So those khuddam too, if they are such that they are in need, for example, because a lot of times what happens is the opposite. The khuddam have like a lot more than the ones that are the makhdumun, right? But if there are the khuddam, as it is very common in the East for khuddam to be those who are usually held by the makhdums, right? The ones who are being served, it makes sense to spend money on them too, and it's considered to be charity. The Prophet ﷺ responded to this. After that, the man said, قال عندي دينار آخر. Even after the khadim thing, the servant thing, that he said that I have another gold coin. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت أبصر. Well, you know better where to spend it now. But تصدق, that's the point. Right? The Prophet ﷺ did not say after that, ijma'. Right? Like do jam'a of it. Like, okay, so you know where else you can spend. But like the religious instruction stopped here. Now you're free to do whatever you want. But you see, firstly, spending on yourself is mentioned there. Secondly, spending on your wife is considered to be a sadaqah as well, which is the main focus over here, and your children as well. Right? So whenever you spend something, it should not be looked at as an obligation only. One of the problems that I see I would say that people who are still in like the first or the second decade of their marriage is that there's a lot of focus on like what are the obligations. After that, they just go like, just like what, right? I think it happens in the second decade too. But definitely like in the beginning or first few years, there's a lot of emphasis on like obligations and rights. It's like it's like a fight, definitely. And there's a lot of emphasis on the fact that if something needs to be done, it needs to be done because of the fact that it's an obligation, especially the rights of the females. So two things need to be understood here from both sides. One, obligations are important to understand because you know how your rights are established through obligations. So if a female goes like, well, it is obligatory for you to provide this for me, she's exercising her right. She's mentioning that, okay, this is my right and I should get that. But usually I would say that's not what happens from either of the sides. It's usually that thing is being provided, but it's just the way it's being provided is not good enough. So the obligation card is played. But if both sides were to engage in the obligations and whatever those obligations are in a more generous manner, right, then everyone's going to be happy. Everyone should be happy at least. There's still a possibility that someone will be like, well, I'm still not satisfied, but you can't really satisfy someone who is not ready to be satisfied. But the point being that obligations should be understood. They should be carried out. They should be fulfilled, but they should not be the main driving force in your relationship. Obligations, rights and rights, obligations and rights and rights. Like that's literally what the discussion goes on about. I don't know why. It's just like, okay, this is what's happening between us right now. It's like, yeah, but that's her right though. Oh, that's my right though. Oh, that's my it's an obligation on you. It's your obligation. It's like I understand this. The prophetic teachings have been that, okay, it's more than, you understand this from the hadith, right? Why else would the reward be pointed out? You carry out your obligations, you move on. No, but the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that whatever you will spend on your wife, that includes the obligations and the non-obligations, you will be rewarded for that. So there is an encouragement for that. Spend on your wives. Spend on your children. Don't forget yourself. So sometimes it's possible for you to be like, well, you know what? Let me grab something to eat for myself too, right? I would say that this could be applicable to those who are not married too, right? Just as the one that is, that talks about children would be applicable to the ones who have children, right? So the one that mentions the part that mentions that when you feed yourself, that's considered to be sadaqah for you, then that applies to both the one who's married and not married. Right? Does that make sense? So when you feed yourself through halal money, that's also sadaqah, you just need the intention. Now, the second point that I was going to mention about this is that this narration clarifies that spending on your family is not a random act that becomes rewarding because of the fact that you have an intention of doing good attached to it. Because that's everything. Like it has been particulated by the Prophet ﷺ that it's something that you will be rewarded for. You will be rewarded for it. So, Ibn Hajj al-Alawi, as well as many other usulis in the past, they've discussed this, that are there certain obligations that could be carried out without the intention or not. So nafaqah is one of them. You do not need the intention from the usuli perspective. You do not need the intention to fulfill this obligation. You know how there's an obligation of prayers? You do need the intention, right? Your intention has to be there for the obligation to be carried out. But for nafaqah, for example, so there's a woman that you're married to, and then you're paying for her food. That is a necessity, and an obligation on you too. So when you buy food for her, some the parts that are considered to be obligatory, did you have the intention of fulfilling that obligation or not? You don't really need that intention. The obligation will be fulfilled on its own. It's kind of understood on its own, right? And whatever is beyond that is also going to be rewarding, is the point I'm mentioning here. On its own, the reward is going to be attached to it, even if you have the intention or not. So you know how they say that everything is rewarding if you have the right intention? This is beyond that. It has been specified by the Prophet ﷺ that this action, you get rewarded for it if you do it. Not that, any action that is done, let's say that a person goes like, hey, is it going to be rewarding for me that if I move this chair from this place to this other place? It's like, yeah, if you have good intention that some Muslims would be helped by that, you will get rewarded by that. It's not that. It's actually been particulated by the Prophet ﷺ that whatever you spend and feed your children with, that is considered to be sadaqah. Does that make sense? So it's more encouraged, it's more emphasized that you would actually earn money and you would like to spend on them. Not that you would feel that, oh, it's an obligation to have to spend on them. Does that make sense? I hope that was clear. One more hadith, and inshallah we'll do Salat al-Isha when the adhan is given. The next hadith, it is also a long one, so we might have to break it in between, but let's see, inshallah. Hadith 13. This is really, really interesting. I think in our class today, this is the most interesting of all narrations. Supporting the husband financially, right? Is there a precedence for this? Has this been related by the Prophet ﷺ or from the time of the Prophet ﷺ? Is it normal or not? Is it Islamic or not? Is it within the confines of a perfect model of a marriage or not? Has it been approved by the Prophet ﷺ or not? Those will be the answers you'll be getting in this lecture today, inshallah. عن زينب امرأة عبد الله قالت كنت في المسجد فرأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال تصدقنا ولو من حليكم. That Abdullah ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنه. Who is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? He's a famous companion of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. It is narrated from his wife Zainab that she was in the mosque once. She was like, I was in the mosque, and the Prophet ﷺ was there too. And the Prophet ﷺ said to the women, "Tasaddaqna, give charity." Now, this charity, tasaddaqna over here, the people of knowledge, particularly, I would say, the Hanafis and others, they have disagreed on the meaning of this. That does that refer to giving zakah, or does it refer to any charity? Right? But we will go with a more general meaning, that is giving charity, because the charity is obligatory or not, they're both going to be included in that. وَلَوْ مِنْ حَلُيِّكُنَّ. even if it happens to be from your jewelry. So your jewelry that you're saving, give charity from that as well. وكانت زينب تنفق على عبد الله وأيتام في حجرها. And Zainab, the wife of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, she used to spend on Abdullah ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنه وأيتام في حجرها, as well as orphans that were, a few orphans that were in her care. قال فقالت لعبد الله, the narrator says that, Zainab said to her husband Abdullah, سل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يجزي عني أن أنفق عليك وعلى أيتامي في حجري من الصدقة. So the wife of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, she asked him, Abdullah, that asked the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, is it okay for me to spend on you as well as these orphans that are in my care? Sadaqah, that is. So if it's obligatory, that would be a discussion of can you give zakat to your husband or not. If it's not obligatory, which is agreed upon, because everyone agrees on this, right? Then it will be that can I spend on my husband or not, as well as those other people. فقال سلي, Abdullah responded to her, he's like, you ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sali anti Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, you go and ask, I'm not asking. Right? It's really interesting. If you could just move a little over there, you would see that in the riwayah of Nasa'i, as well as others, it says, وَكَانَ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ خَفِيفَ ذَاتِ الْيَدِ. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu, he did not used to earn a lot. He was khafif ذات اليد. He was light-handed, literally. He did not used to have a lot of earnings. A companion of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not that she's saying that, well, we talked about this in the previous classes, right? Is that why would a woman have to spend when the obligation on the man is to provide for her? What's the answer? Because she wants to and he wants to. Back up. They have a thing going on. She didn't go and complain to the Prophet ﷺ that why is my husband not working and providing me? What did she go for? Is it okay for me to spend on him? If you take it from the understanding that it's obligatory, then the discussion is a lot more sensible that, okay, can I give him zakat? Right? The Hanafis themselves have a different opinion about that, right? From like Abu Hanif and his students, etc. Can I give zakat to him? And others would be, the other interpretation would be, can I actually give sadaqah to them? So we'll continue inshallah after salah. Let's just pause. Remind all students and participants that they can send questions on the link that's been shared in the Telegram group as well. If they wish to ask questions anonymously related to the Hadiths that we're covering or topics that relate to marriage in general, inshallah, you can ask. So the narration that we'll be on is the narration of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and his wife going to the Prophet ﷺ and asking whether she can spend on her husband or not. I think this narration itself answers key questions when it comes to how to maintain obligations and carry out those obligations, fulfill them, at the same time have like a safe or healthy relationship financially. In the previous narration, we looked at the husbands or the men spending on their wives and their children. This narration particularly focuses on the woman spending on the husband. What's the approval of the Prophet ﷺ, as you see towards the end? So far, what's happened is that Zainab, the Imra Abdullah, that is the wife of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, she was at the mosque. She heard the Prophet ﷺ say, "Tasaddaqna." In some narrations, it comes as "Ya ma'ashar al-nisa," and "Walaw min huriyikunna," even if it happens to be spending that is being done from your own jewelry, right? The jewelry that the women own, not anything that's owned by the females is automatically owned by the males. So the jewelry that is owned by the females, they can actually give charity taken out from that as the prophetic instructions. So she used to spend, كانت زينب تنفق على عبد الله. She used to spend on Abdullah ibn Mas'ud as well as a few orphans that were in her care. فقالت لعبد الله, so she said to Abdullah, that is it permissible for me to spend on you or not? Is it okay for me to spend on you or not. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about this. أيجزي عني أن أنفق عليك? Is it fine for me? Is it okay for me? Is it proper for me to spend on you? وعلى إتامي, but that's not the focus right now, right? فقال سألني أنت رسول الله. He's like, you asked the Messenger of Allah. فانطلقت إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فوجدت امرأة من الأنصار على الباب. So she's like, okay. Abdullah bin Mas'ud said that you go ask the Prophet ﷺ about spending on me or not. And I already quoted from the riwayah Muslim that كان Abdullah, what does it say? خفيف ذات اليد. That he was someone who was not earning a lot. Right? So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, technically, the opposite is not related from him, was enjoying what we talked about in our previous classes. Al-Qadi Abdul Jabbar, Abdul Wahab, he talked to him Abdul Jabbar because he's popular in the Usul ratings. Al-Qadi Abdul Wahab, he mentions the تنكح المرأة لأربع. Remember the narration that we discussed? That a woman is to be married for 4 reasons. Right? فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ, and go for the one that is religious. Go for religiosity. And that will be a form of success for you. But he argues, rightfully so, that from that narration that it is also telling you that those are also valid reasons, but the precedence or the priority is supposed to be given to religion. Right? Which is why he mentions that, well, a man can actually enjoy a wealth that is his own and also chipped in or brought in to the general pool of the family by the female as well. What's wrong with that? So when you make everything about obligations, there is no obligation on the female to spend on the man. The obligation is only on the man, but that does not mean that no cross-spending can actually happen. That means that you can actually spend as much as you want, and obligations are in their own place. The reason why obligations are not on the females and they're on the males is because there is more emphasis in the Sharia to get the females married as soon as possible. So they have fewer prereqs. Absolutely no prereqs, actually. What does a female have to do to get married in Islam? Absolutely nothing. Does she have to build something? Does she have to be a level of, she doesn't have to do anything. She just has to be of age and she gets married. That's the actual incentive behind it. Not the fact that she goes like, well, you know what, I'm gonna make to become a part of the system in a way that she makes it more difficult for marriages to happen. I mean, she's not the direct cause, but I'm saying just the fact that she does not have obligations on her, and therefore the man does, and that has now become problematic that the man has his obligations as a prereq to such an extent that he is required to reach certain goals, and then after that he can get married. Now that has a ripple effect that even women are not getting married because they're looking for the ideal guy. Right? The ideal guy is the one who's the provider. Why is he the provider? Because the obligations are on him. Where was this mindset in Abdullah bin Mas'ud's wife or in the Prophet's time? This mindset did not exist. Imagine this, the propagator, the one who taught us the obligations, right? He himself in his own time did not have this type of mindset promoted. Like, she goes to Abdullah and asks, can you ask the Prophet, is it okay for me to spend on you? He goes like, you go ask her. That itself has its own discussion, obviously, right? Because you go like, well, okay, so he told his wife to go ask the question and he himself did not ask? Yes, that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And to always have this, caveat of like, it's the Prophet, that makes absolutely no sense, because that can be said about anything. Anything that you bring forth, you can be like, well, that's the Prophet. What happens when you talk about the Hajj then? Right? Not the technical discussions of obligation of it, obviously, but a lot of times you go like, well, the Prophet used to pray so much. The whole point is that you should do the same. The Prophet never used to harm his wives. The whole point is that you don't do the same. Isn't it? But what about here? Am I making sense or not? We're all supposed to follow the Prophet. The main thing is like, is that a safe person or not? Right? If there is a safe person, there's nothing wrong for a female to actually go and ask him the question, a legal question, even if the husband goes like, well, you can do that. Right? They don't have to be related or anything. Now look at this. She goes to the Prophet's home, and she mentions that I found another female over there from the tribe of Ansar who was at the door. She had the same issue. She was also spending on her husband. So it was not an anomaly, right? She was also spending on her husband, and she also wanted to know whether it's okay to spend on her husband, right? فمر علينا بلال. The Bilal radiallahu anhu, the famous companion of the Prophet ﷺ, he passed by. It's being recorded, right? Yeah. Then, can anyone hear me online? Does it sound clear? Yeah. So Bilal radiallahu anhu, he passed by these two females at the door of the Prophet ﷺ. This is an authentic narration, whether it comes to the Bukhari, Sahih, right? There's no doubt about it. How come we never heard this before? It's not my fault. It's not your fault either, right? فمر علينا بلال فقلنا سل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So we, like those two women, they said, let's ask Bilal to ask. So everyone's like hesitating, right? So Bilal, he was passing by and they talked to him. They didn't turn away and look at the wall while Bilal was passing by, or be like, if you talk to them, it's considered to be haram or something like that, right? Like a person passed by. I mean, there's more like social commentary that could be done on this, but we'll skip on that part for now. Right? So they're like, okay, why don't you ask the Prophet ﷺ, Bilal, on behalf of us, is it okay for each one of us, like individually asking the question, is it okay for me to spend on my husband and a few orphans that are in my care? And those women also said that you don't tell the Prophet ﷺ that we're the ones who sent you. Right now we're outside. Right? فدخل فسأله. Then Bilal radiallahu anhu, he entered the home of the Prophet ﷺ. He asked him that question. Whatever the question was, that is it okay for a female to spend on her husband? فقال من هما? The Prophet ﷺ asked, like, who's the couple we're talking about? Who are the two? Like, who's the husband and the wife? قال زينب. Bilal said that it's Zaynab, right? قال أي الزيان? The Prophet ﷺ asked that, which Zaynab is it? Which of the Zaynabs? قال امرأة عبد الله. That's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's wife. So you would imagine right now, it's like you would know obligations. Why is he not earning and providing for his wife? Ideal, 100%, because you go like, yeah, systemically, if you were to look at the fact that whoever has the obligation is the one who's providing, so she would not have to spend on him. Or you would imagine over here, it's like, perhaps maybe Abdullah was earning too. And she just wanted to ask whether I can, after the lifestyle that we have where he's fulfilling all the obligations and providing more, can I still spend or not? Nope. The narration of Muslim actually very clearly mentions that كان Abdullah خفيف ذات اليد, that he was someone who did not used to earn a lot. Does that make sense? A lot of times we have this discussion of, let's look at the answer first and then I'll come to this little point that I like to make. قال امرأة عبد الله. Bilal mentioned that it's the wife of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم نعم لها أجران أجر القرابة وأجر الصدقة. Yes, this woman that is Zaynab was spending on her husband will get double rewards, or double actually, two rewards. أجران. One reward of al-qarabah, the relationship she's in. She's growing stronger in her relationship by spending on her husband. She has a reward. وَأَجْرُ الصَّدَقَةِ, and she's also becoming closer to God, or I think that's a better way to put it. She's getting closer to her husband by spending on him, and she's getting closer to God by spending that is giving charity. So that charity you accept it. And again, the technical discussion over here is by those your students that are of the view that is it halal, is it permitted to give zakat to your husband or not, right? And within the Hanafi school, as well as other schools, there is some sort of validity that could be attributed to this view as well, right? It's a valid refugee's opinion whether zakat can be given to the female, to the husband or not. But everyone agrees that if this narration is talking about, that's the focus in our class, talking about spending that is done so you can earn rewards, right? So we're not going to get into the technicalities of this right now, but the main point is that it's okay for her to spend on the Prophet on her husband. And the Prophet approved of it. He did not say that go and tell Abdullah how come he's not earning more than whatever he's earning right now, and his wife has to spend on him, and then she's coming and asking this question. Now you think about it, there are people that I know that want to get married. The guy's ready, the girl's ready too, but they're not getting married because of the fact that the guy is at a stage right now where he's not able to fulfill those obligations properly. But if you were to look at it, and I don't want to I'm not someone who would intervene or invade their privacy and say that, well, you guys that this is how it could work, right? But when the husband and the wife, the potentials, the man and the woman, when they want to get married and they can get married, why is the focus on obligations so much that you're delaying something that is supposed to be done ASAP? How does that make sense? You go like the man is supposed to be providing what? Food, water, clothing, and space for her to live, right? A private space. You go like, is it possible for us both to work in a way that we can adjust a little? Like she goes like, I'll bring in some money, you bring in some money, and then we can possibly do something temporarily, permanently. It's between you guys. The main thing is that obligations should not be looked at in a way that, especially when they know each other from before and they want to get married. I mean, if there's an arranged marriage, it's still a bit understandable. The woman would be like, I don't want to be stuck in a position where the man will never be, down to like fulfill his obligations. Right? He does not even care about his obligations, which is also debatable because of the fact that Abdullah's situation did not really change. Abdullah was not a bad husband. He was not. It's just that people are different. Does that make sense? If let's say that who has the obligation to provide for children? The father, right? If there is a family that goes through crisis, does the daughter not stand up and go like, you know what, I'm going to help out too? But does she go like, well, father, you have the obligation, so why did you give birth to us? Right? That makes no sense. Usually what's said is like, why did you get married if you couldn't take the obligations? So we're supposed to be partners. And this is not something that is, being made up. It has precedence. It is found in authentic hadith. Why is it disregarded? I understand this. So the girl wants to get married. The guy wants to get married, but the guy himself on his own is not able to carry out the obligations in relation to the female, not even God, right? In relation to her, but she's still waiting on it because when he's gonna be okay to get to fulfill the obligation, that's when we're gonna get married. How does that make sense? That does not make any sense. In light of the prophetic narrations, it does not make sense because it is completely fine for the husband to spend on the females he's married to, or his wives and his children. It's completely fine within the confines of obligation and beyond. Right? It says very clearly, that whatever you're going to feed is zawjatak. So if a husband takes his wife to a restaurant and he feeds her there, he's going to get rewarded for that. And that is not an obligation. He can actually just provide her with the lowest level of food that she's accustomed to, let's say, right? And she should be fine. But that's not what is supposed to be done. So you're supposed to do more than obligations. You're supposed to make her happy, give her more time. You're supposed to take care of her. But there's a possibility that people come from different backgrounds and the finances don't really match up sometimes, right? Well, that does not mean that the female cannot contribute. That makes sense. When the concept of contribution or contributing factor is there is no reason for that to be the cause for the delay in marriage. 100%. As I told you before, too, the actual incentive or the wisdom behind women not having those obligations is because of the fact that they're supposed to be married ASAP. The women are supposed to be married ASAP. Yes.
Why is that? Why women should be married ASAP and not men? What is the difference?
The difference, as argued for by those who, that's the question if no one was able to hear it. But what's the difference that women there's a strong incentive in them getting married compared to men? Technically, they're both supposed to be married as soon as possible, but what I'm saying is there's more emphasis on females to be married faster is because of the fact that they are more prone to fitna, right? So when the hadiths talk about women, quote unquote, are fitna, it's usually taken in a way that they're evil. That's not your right understanding. They're not evil. Are you following what I'm saying? They are a challenge for you. A challenge for fathers, a challenge for husbands, a challenge for guys outside. As you will see in the narrations that follow, the narration that the last one particularly that we'll do today, you will see that there's no negativity in this necessarily. Right? Because your awlad are also fitna. Technically. Your children are also fitna. Is there any negativity in that? Absolutely not. It's like the test in females is a lot more strongly related than in males. That's why they have been singled out as like, okay, you are the ones who are more prone to fitna than others. So marriage has to be facilitated for them for that fitna to be avoided. That makes a lot more sense. Like males themselves are the ones. We'll discuss that later, inshallah. Someone asked, like, why are they more prone to fitna? But that's going to have a different discussion, right? But right now the point is like, why is the obligations connected to males and not towards the females when they both have the ability to spend and earn as well, right? Or have money to spend. Like over here in this narration, for example, you see that Abdullah's wife is, when I say that, I'm not really saying that that's the only reason, right? That's kind of understandable because there could be other factors as well. There's also the factor of, and that could be related back to the fitna aspect of it, that men are more required to go outside. And that also, everything is like connected. The fact that the men's body is not entirely considered to be awrah, right? They can go out and they do whatever they want. There are less limitations related to the controlling factors of males and females too. So that also plays into or factors into the fact that, well, they don't really have the obligation on it, right? As we will see in a few of the narrations that follow, there are certain things that a female cannot do without the permission of the husband. So he gets more control of not just her as a female, but like in the roles that they're playing as a head of the family, he gets more control of certain things. So the obligations have to be given from him too. That's also another fact that you can understand from the different narrations that we're studying them. That why is it that the obligation is not related to them? But the fitna aspect of it in general, for females, that has a lot to be talked about, obviously, because it's not just restricted to. The fitna literally, by the way, in case someone is thinking how it translates, like it means a trial, right? The trials related to them are stronger. So let's say that if you were to just talk about marriage itself, the trials related to or the challenges related to marriage are stronger in females as well, or stronger related to females as well. So marriage has been facilitated for them in a better way. They get married younger, they have less responsibilities. You see, like it's a clear path for females. Am I making sense? Yeah. So going back to the hadith itself, the Prophet ﷺ, you see that this was not considered to be a reason why a marriage should be considered non-ideal, problematic, or not even commensurate. So here the marriage is continuing, right? And someone can say that, well, maybe, since the marriage has been initiated, the contract or the wedding wedlock is already there, so you just got to deal with it, right? But where is their necessity for that? Why can't a man and a woman come together and be like, yeah, okay, so these are my finances, and she goes like, these are my finances. I want to get married to you. You want to get married to me, and these are the obligations that I have on myself, but I won't be able to carry on. She goes like, I got you, because I want to get married to you too. The Sharia has complete. There's not even karaha related to that. There's not even the slightest form of dislikeness or inappropriateness that is related to that. It's all social. It's completely social. Marriage needs to be easier, as you will see later on too, inshallah. Right? SubhanAllah. And then after that, I've mentioned the extensions. رواه البخاري ومسلم واللفظ الأول ورواه النسائي بسند صحيح وفيه وكان عبد الله خفيف ذات اليد. The fact that I mentioned this particularly is not that Abdullah was earning and providing in a full-fledged manner, and then his wife was, well, I would like to spend, so is it okay for me to spend or not? I mean, based on the narrative or the interpretation that this refers to, voluntary charity, right? Not obligatory. So she wanted to spend on her husband, is that okay or not? No, we also have this background that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was someone who was did not have lucrative earnings, right? وفي رواية أحمد فقالت امرأة من علية النساء لما نحن أكثر أهل جهنم عفوا يوم القيامة. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن كنا تكثرن اللعن وتكثرن العشير. So there's a part of this narration, and this will be connected to what we discussed, alhamdulillah, this is brought up, right? Is that the Prophet ﷺ said they give more sadaqah. So the context is traced back. The woman over here that is Zainab, the wife of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, she's spending on her husband, the famous, a very honorable and brilliant companion of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not a random man that he would say, well, yeah, there are men of different types, and that's the man too. No, this is one of the chosen ones. This is from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. His wife is spending on him, right? The Prophet ﷺ, she questioned her, can I do the spending on my husband too when she was already doing that? Can I continue to do that after she heard the Prophet ﷺ say, "Tasaddaqna walau min huliyikum," that he should emphatically so give more charity. So there are other percentages of this hadith, right? In which it's mentioned that you women should give more charity because of the fact that you will be more in number in the hellfire, in the hereafter. So according to one recension of Ahmed, it is mentioned that there was a woman over there that was from a high status sort of woman. And she asked, why us? How come we will be the ones, not the men? And you should also understand this, that questioning was completely fine during the time of the Prophet. Not that you've done something that is khilaf al-adab, and then you would quote that person that, remember when he asked me this question? Every single time. Right? Why are we the ones who are the majority in the hellfire? One woman asked that. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن كنا تكثرن اللعن وتكفرن العشير. Because of the fact that the Prophet ﷺ himself witnessed and relays, because of the fact that you curse a lot, وتكفرن العشير, and you are ungrateful to your husbands a lot. Right? And a lot obviously is something that I'm adding to the translation. Literally just means because you curse a lot, and because or you send curses, it's a lot. So you do not control your tongue. وَتَكْفُرْ الْعَشِيرِ, and you do not, you are not grateful to your husbands. It's all connected. Does that make sense? Then again, the fitna aspect of it, because of the fact that the controllability of women is also there before marriage, after marriage. So marriage is facilitated for them. Even after that, they're supposed to be under the care of a man, and that's their husband. Does that make sense? But however, there is no negation between this and the fact that the obligations plus the spending that is done voluntarily by either of the sides is completely fine. As long as everyone is achieving their goals in a peaceful and good manner. Am I making sense? Obligations are amazing, but that does not mean that you miss out on your own goals. If a woman is not getting married because of the fact that she's waiting for her fiance or the person that she likes, etc., to be able to provide for her so he can fulfill her obligations while she has the ability to support him, she is the one wrong at that point, that she's staying unmarried. She's choosing to stay unmarried. And the first hadith that we did, in which the Prophet ﷺ very strongly discouraged or sternly mentioned that a person should not stay unmarried. When you reach puberty or when you reach an age when you are inclined towards the opposite gender, you should be married, right? Or you're able to perform sexual intercourse, that is your age. So it could be relatively different from people's different bodies, etc. Are also be taken are supposed to be taken into consideration. As for the time in which you are in the process of it, while there's no actual hurdle that's in the marriage itself, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? That makes sense. So let's say that there's a travel associated with it. There is some other hurdle that's kind of delaying the process, but you're making it happen. Right? There's no other social problem due to which you're stuck. And you're waiting 2 years now. Why? Because he's going to graduate, and then he'll get a job, and then he can get a place, and then you can do it. But you do it all together, you can do something. Right? As well as the other thing. This is when you do not get married, as people do not get married. And the other thing is that, is it wrong for those households to be maintained in a way that the woman is providing? It sounds off when you say it like that, right? But there's nothing wrong with it in light of this narration of the Prophet as well as other narrations that we'll see later. And there is absolutely nothing wrong, religiously speaking, if the woman is actually contributing in the household. So a lot of times you will see, due to cultural effects, you would see that there are certain households, and let's say the man loses his job, or let's say that just he had like a failure like to launch or something, due to which, or like he's in a field that does not really provide that much, or anything, and the woman actually. The wife, she loves that man, right? Or she wants to support that family that she's a part of, and she contributes a lot more strongly than the man. So culturally, they look at it in a negative light. They go like, "What kind of household is this? The man does not really do anything." They go, "Well, if you have a complaint, then it should be against Abdullah bin Mas'ud too. It should be against the Prophet ﷺ too, because the Prophet ﷺ was shown the scenario. He did not complain about it. He actually said that she will get double the reward, or two rewards." Two rewards, right? She'll get two rewards. The reward of being closer to her husband by financially supporting him, and the reward of giving charity. Does that make sense? I guess the last thing that I would also point out is that charity, well, begins at home. Obviously, that's from both sides, males and females. But the fact that some people actually believe that charity is not even given to the family. That makes absolutely no sense. It's completely debunked by this hadith. Like they go like sadaqah is something that is not even given to family. Yes, it can be given to family, and not just any family. It can be given to the one that you provide. That's your provider, technically, or in terms of its obligations. So when you give to your parents, for example, that's also sadaqah. When you give money to your parents, it's also sadaqah. You guys understand what I'm saying? Alhamdulillah. Next hadith. This is the translation. I'm going to move on to the second page. It should be on the first page. Hadith 14 is removing burdens in marriage. This is an interesting hadith. I believe that many of you might not have heard of this hadith before. It is kind of rare, especially in this wording, but it is authentically related by Ahmed Rahimahullah in his Muslim. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها, it is narrated from عائشة رضي الله عنها, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, إن من يمن المرأة تيسير خطبتها وتيسير صداقها وصداقها is the رواية مشهورة وتيسير رحمها. Indeed, from the blessing or the good fortune of a female is the facilitation of proposing to her. Proposing to her is easy. You don't have to go through like, is I was going to propose to her. That's actually a blessed woman. The woman that you can easily approach. Right? وَتَيْسِيرَ صَدَاقِهَا, and it's easy to take care of her dowries. Right? Her dowry is not too difficult. The dowry that is like in the Emirates right now, my friend was here recently, a childhood friend of mine from the Emirates. And we were just talking, and I asked him, like how well it's like, how are the dowries right now? Right? I swear to God, they're like so expensive. It's even like, it's even higher than like Toronto. 100% like Emirates is like way too, from what I've heard. It's too much. It's like 100,000 Canadian dollars is like where they actually start from. And I was like, I don't know, man. It's like, yeah, a lot of people are not married because of that. In certain areas, the more are like a lot, like the dowries are like really, really high. But it's from the barakah or the yumn of the female that her dowry is such that's easy. Now look at this. Even though there are other narrations that focus on the increase of the amount itself, but over here it talks about that they see, right? So it's inclusive of both the higher ones and the lower ones. The main thing is facilitating it in a way that the husband or the potential husband or the suitor can actually fulfill it properly, right? So when we were talking connected to the hadith before this, when it's okay for a woman to contribute after marriage, it should be okay if she plans that before marriage as well, right? Why is it not okay for a female to be like, okay, you know what, my husband is someone who's not earning that much, I will contribute to the family. But before that, she's not going to do that. That makes absolutely no sense. She can actually plan to, like, yeah, okay, I can bring more money to the table, on the table, and we can actually have a successful relationship. I like this person, and he likes me too. There is a possibility, right? So taysir would be the fact that let's say that that's not the situation, right? But her female cousins have the mahar of like let's say 25,000, and she goes like, well, I'm not going to go less than that. 25,000 like Canadian dollars or like American, you could say, right? If you're like Houston or something, right? $25,000, $35,000 of like mahar, but she happens to like a guy, right? Which is completely fine, as we looked at the few narrations before. لم يرى للمتحابين مثل النكاح, as narrated from the Prophet ﷺ in Sunan Majah, that nothing is better than marriage for those two people who love each other. So let's say she falls in love, or she finds a guy who falls in love with her, and she goes like, well, he's gonna love me his whole life, so that will be a good relationship, because she lives by the rule that's hypothetical. These are all hypotheticals. She lives by the rule that, well, get married to someone who loves you, not the one that you love. She goes, okay, let me get married to this guy because he likes me, he loves me. But he goes like, well, I don't think I can afford 25,000. But that's the model that she would have proposed. But she goes, okay, so I can do some taysir. I can make it easy. I'll go with 20. Whatever, he goes like, I can do that. Right? Or whatever is like, so the main thing is like, the goals are easily achieved. From the barakah of the human and the female, that it's easier or nice or easier to achieve, or the achievements are considered to be facilitated. With taysir rahimiha, as well as literally the way it's translated is access to her womb is easy. So three things have been mentioned. What is access to the womb mean? That you can have children with her. You can build a family with her without complications for yourself. As well as the fact that the means for having children, which is also related to the rahim itself, is also easy. Right? Like sexual intercourse is not a difficulty. There are certain cultures, and some of them creep in the West as well, in which the performance of sexual intercourse itself is expressed as disturbance. I promise you. They actually call it disturbance. Like the man's here to disturb us now. I don't know what's going on. Definitely, some things need to be explored more. But sexuality itself should not be looked at like as a burden, right? I would say this hadith, taysir al-rahiyah, would be inclusive of both. That is, to have sexual intercourse and to have children. Both of them are facilitated matters, right? This is not really talking about forcing anything on the woman. This hadith is silent about it. It's just talking about the fact that the barakah of a female, so that everyone learns, right? The male learns, the female learns too. The Prophet's teachings are for everybody. That the barakah in a female, so when a man wants to get married, when he is looking for a female, he will see that the one that is more mubarakah, the female that has more blessing, or the one that is yamin, you can say, the one that is has more blessing or yum in her, is the one who's easy to approach, who's easy to get married to, in terms of like paying her dowry, as well as easy to have children with. Not someone who keeps creating difficulties in your life due to whatever influence she has. Right? Unfortunately, in our times, there's a lack of balance between one, having a proper family that is a support system for the female, which is really important, by the way. A female should not be like, I don't know, she should have a support system. Right? I'm talking about in the general context. There is a possibility that a female does not really feel that's supported by her own family, that she diverts her entire attention towards the husband or the man she's married to. There is a possibility. But generally speaking, I would say, especially the men that we know of, and there's a lot of cases of, unfortunately, a lot of cases of physical abuse related to females, like males have attacked females in a manner that's unimaginable. Unfortunately, even those who are religious, right? It makes sense for females to have support systems. We're talking about our sisters here, right? Not as like actual sisters, like our Muslim sisters. They're supposed to have a proper support system. And I think, I could be wrong, but I do think that, the whole system that we are, I mean, I cracked a joke about it, that, when the female is like passing or they don't interact in the craft, there's like a bigger divide for a female to actually reach out to people whenever she's in issues. The only ones that she can reach out to is her direct brothers or father or uncles, etc. And if they're not open to listening, or they're not able to like deal with it properly when she's stuck. That happens a lot of times. Or she hesitates because she has developed an understanding about her own family in a way that if I'm going to tell them, this might not be taken in a positive way. So she waits and waits and waits, and the guy exploits this. So she should have that support system for sure. And the other opposite part of it is that you're not looking at the husband's rights in facilitating everything for him. There's like a lack of balance in this. You understand what I'm saying? Like how much are you dedicated towards your husband and how much are you dedicated towards your quote unquote family? Technically your family becomes your husband's family, or your husband's family becomes your family, right? But that lack of balance, I would say that the phenomenon that we see that is very problematic is the no disrespect, obviously, to anyone. Just as we talked about the men being physically abusive towards females, there are also women that do takhdeed of other females' homes, even the ones from their families, right? So sisters that give you really bad advice, that give females really bad advice, mothers that give really bad advice, as well as males as well. You know, it's not like if a male has traits of females, then it's the same thing. Like, what's the difference, right? If your brother is talking in the same way that your sister would, then what's the difference? So sometimes there's such a strong influence from your support system in a negative way that you're not able to see the good things in your husband. You know, the hadith that was mentioned before, that mentioned that you're ungrateful to your husband. There are people who actually encourage females to see their husbands in a negative light or a more negative light. So in the case that Abdullah bin Mas'ud that we looked at, there would be a lot of people who would be saying, what kind of man are you married to who is not earning and providing and you're the one who's spending on? Even if she has money, which is none of their business technically. They can live however they want to live. It's completely funny. Now, why is he not pulling his weight, sort of thing, right? They can do whatever they want. Leave them alone. However they want their life to be perfected, they can go in that direction. Does that make sense? It's unfortunate that there are many non-Muslim households that are able to see this a lot more clearly than Muslim households. Like the concept of obligation is not supposed to make things difficult for you. It's supposed to make things easier for you. That you understand what's what and what's required. Okay, this is your obligation. This is not your obligation. You can still do this. You can still not do this. Right? Like the more rules we have over here, Islamic rules, they're not supposed to be rules as in that make things more difficult because you can't do the other thing. If anything, the only difficulty would be on the man that he said that, well, you know what, I'm in a relationship where I've been asked to fulfill my obligations all the time and I have to do it. That's it. But there's a lot more cultural stuff that ruins marriages, unfortunately. They see it in general in relation to a female in terms of how you initiate the marriage. They see what they see as sadaqiha. How do you carry out the wedlock and or like you have the marriage itself? What they see rahimha or whatever you do afterwards, there should be tafsir of that. And that's the barakah of the female as mentioned by the Prophet alayhi salam. رواه أحمد بسند حسن أحمد رحمه الله has heard this in his Muslim ورواه الطبراني في الصغير, that is his المعجم الصغير, وزاد قال عروة بن الزبير, so it's related in that narration of the recension of شو اسمه الطبراني. So بقول أنا عروة بن الزبير, he said, one of the narrators, he said, well, I say من أول شؤمها أن يكثر صداقها. Is that from her lack of blessing, a female's lack of blessing, or her bad fortune or evil fortune, is the fact that her sadaq, her mahar, is a lie. Does that make sense? However, it does not really go beyond karaha, legally speaking. If a female wants a high mahar due to security, right? She can actually, because it is, if you were to look at the society that we live in, the East or the whatever is being built in the West for the past few decades, which is like a bad mixture of like Western concepts and ideologies and Eastern customs and quote unquote religious activities, whatever is manifesting. You would see definitely that there is a reason for a female to have a high mahar to guarantee security for herself, right? If someone doesn't want it, he can move on. He can be looking at this hadith and was like, well, there's no tafsir of sadaq in you. I'll find someone else. But look at this. If there is an encouragement and an understanding of a positive understanding of getting married, and looking at obligations and the way they're supposed to be looked at, and looking at the time of the Prophet and all the things that are allowed, marriage becomes easier. It's not like you have one suitor, and then if you get through with that suitor or not, then you're just gonna wait for like months to get into the suitor. That's because of the fact that people have like a criterion that is not really backed up by Sharia or the understandings that they have, if that makes sense. So, well, there's a mistake here, should be suggested, but it should be said فيه عيسى بن ميمون وهو متروك أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن أعظم النكاح بركة أيسره مؤونة. This is very famous, but this narration is not really established, unfortunately. Right? The madar of this hadith, the hadith's chains are all dependent or all contain one narrative. So Isa ibn Maymun. Isa ibn Maymun was a discarded, literally, or an extremely weak narrator of hadith, and even though this hadith is famous. The reason it was famous, obviously, because it comes to Mishkah, right? That the greatest nikah in terms of barakah, in terms of blessing, is the one that's the easiest in terms of the specified spending that happens on the family. Does that make sense? However, this other hadith that I mentioned definitely corroborates this other hadith in terms of its meaning. That's what I'm about here. Does that make sense? The wording of it may not be related soundly from the Prophet, but the meaning of it is correct. That the greatest nikah that a person can have in terms of barakah or in terms of blessing is the one that's the easiest in terms of spending. Even though a vaster meaning might be understood from this hadith, which I would say that should not be permitted, should be permitted because of the fact that the hadith's wording itself is not related from the Prophet soundly. But just the facilitation of matters itself is backed up by many of the narrations, including the one that I quoted, that in the Mar'ah, تيسير خدمتها وتيسير صداقها وتيسير رحمها. The facilitating matters, making it easy, is there. Does that make sense? Does that refer to possibly the spending on itself that's done, in which there's like mutual understanding of the sadaq not being there, the khitbah not being there? Like it does not relate to dowry, it does not relate to the proposal itself, it does not relate to having children itself. But there are other forms of expenses that are being done by the husband and wife within the marriage, and you would say, well, that is not full of barakah, that's debatable. Do you understand what I'm saying? The narration that we're looking at, that is number 14, that says very explicitly that a woman's barakah is the fact that she has an easy way of being proposed, an easy way of giving dowry to her, and the easy way of having children with her or performing sexual intercourse with her. Right? I mean, they both do it together. This meaning can be is captured by the hadith for sure. But let's say someone goes like, well, the husband and the wife, if they want to spend money, they're different restaurants, but they go to Highways, for example, right? And you're dropping a lot of money if you're going there, or anywhere else, compared to where like Aleppo Kebab. You go to Aleppo Kebab, right? And you're dropping like what? Very little comparatively, right? So someone goes like, well, your nikah is not going to have as much barakah because the ma'una happens to be, the spending that's happening in this marriage is a lot more. Not necessarily. The discussion of Israf is a different discussion, but I'm talking about like just the wedlock itself. Is it affected by it? If you want to take your wife out and to a really expensive restaurant and you can afford it, according to the correct understanding of Israf, different topic, we're not going to get into it, right? But if there is no violation of Israf related to it, according to the correct understanding, then it's totally fine. How much are you going to come down? Right? It's completely fine for certain things to happen. I'll come to the question inshallah at the end. Okay. How come the woman is in the wrong? I'll discuss it inshallah. I'll read it after. The last hadith inshallah is it is narrated from Abu Kabsha al-Nari. There's also a hadith that is sound. It's also not that famous of a narration. That كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جالسا في أصحابه. The Prophet ﷺ was once sitting with his companions. فدخل ثم خرج وقد اغتسل. So the Prophet ﷺ, while he was sitting with his companions, right, he was close to his home. He went inside, and then he came out, and it was obvious that he had taken a bath, right? فقلنا يا رسول الله قد كان شيء. See how comfortable the Sahaba were. They were not like, oh, you can't say this, you'll get offended. You can't say that, you can't get offended. I mean, there were instances in which something was said, or they would hesitate. Everything was there, but there are also instances when they would not. Imagine, compare this to the lives of those people who are constantly, consistently in a way that you cannot say anything to them. Comfortable. This is not considered to be rude if it's imposed in a way that you go like, well, I do feel it, but I can't say it because this guy's gonna get pissed. Right? Like, I want to say this to the sheikh, but the sheikh's not gonna take it lightly. He's gonna be like, yeah, manage issues or something like that. Right? But the Prophet ﷺ was very, very approachable, it seems like. If you were to see his narrations, he was extremely, extremely approachable. If anything, any of the people of knowledge or student of knowledge, it is a good sign among them that if they're very approachable. You can go up to them, you can speak to them. I keep on coming across people who speak to me and they say that, well, we spoke to multiple people before this, but they usually like ignore us, or they have complained a lot of times. I've been hearing for like decades, 2 decades, right? Is that everyone complains about the akhlaq of the people of knowledge, which is strange because they're supposed to show the best akhlaq. Akhlaq not in the way of like, just being polite and thank you, etc. Like the social construct of it, that's good. Alhamdulillah, maybe some of them are different in their demeanor, etc. Akhlaq in a way that when they're approached, like this specific khuluq is what I'm talking about. When they're approached, their responses are big turnoffs. Big turnoffs. Like they're either feel very, very judged, or the responses are given like, they don't make absolutely no sense. Like someone told me that they asked, like, what are you going to say to someone that comes to you and says, I've committed zina? He's like, I'm going to tell him, go do tawbah, and then I'm going to come back. Oh, and then come back, sorry. Go do tawbah and then come back. The people that we're dealing over here, they're already not pious. If they were that pious, then they would have been doing tawbah, and they probably did, right? Like, you got to help that person if they're coming to you. You can't tell them that go and perform these religious duties first and then come back to you. Because there's a good chance this person might not. You got him right now. Like, he has come to you and you're able to help them. Stay connected. And then help them with their situations. I'm talking about, like, the Prophet ﷺ's like teachings. You can't really take certain like fringe cases and then be like, well, that Prophet ﷺ did the same thing, so I'm going to do the same thing. Look at the context of it. That's like your friend goes and gets pissed off, and then he breaks the window of the car, and then you go, well, Umar used to be very angry too, mashallah. Like, that's not worse, right? So you find like an example for a French example for every like misbehavior. Like there are direct instructions that go against this behavior, right? So anyway, so the Sahaba, they asked, قد كان شيء? Did something happen? How did the Prophet ﷺ, who was sitting with us, he got up, he went in, and he came back, and he had performed ghusl, اغتسال. The Prophet ﷺ responded, قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, أجل? He said, yes, indeed. مرت بي فلانة, a female, so-and-so female passed by me. فوقع في قلبي شهوة النساء. So I felt a desire for females in my heart because of that woman's passing. Look at this. And this is the time when the Prophet ﷺ was married to multiple females. فأتيت بعض أزواجي فأصبتها. So I went to one of my wives and I had performed sexual intercourse with her. فكذلك فافعلوا. You should do the exact same thing. فكذلك. That same thing you should do. فإنه من أماثل أعمالكم إتيانكم or إتيان الحلال. Comes both ways. That because from the most perfect of your actions is to perform sexual intercourse in halal manner. Look at this hadith. You would never hear this. But that's the funny part. Like I was mentioning these hadiths to someone, like, how come we've never heard this hadith? So I'm like, that's not my fault, right? So this is what's the sound chain of transmission. the sanad that is Hasan. The Prophet himself mentioned, فَأَتَيْتُ بَعْضَ أَزْوَاجِي فَأَصَبْتُهُ. So this is the scene that happened. The Prophet was sitting with his companions. He got up, he left, he went in, and he came back, and then he had signs of like being Muslim. So they asked like something must have happened. What happened? So he mentioned there was a female that passed while he was sitting with them, and he got attracted to the Prophet ﷺ. And so he went to one of his wives. In another extension of it, وَرَوَى الدَّارِمِيُّ بِسَنَدٍ حَسَنٍ Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, our man of our class today, said, رَأَى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ امْرَأَةً فَأَعْجَبَتْهُ. Darimi's compilation 2 mentions that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud has narrated, which is a different person, right? Like the other narrations from Abu Kabshah. Is that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud narrates that the Prophet ﷺ saw a female and what does that mean? He liked her, right? Like she had the ability to make the Prophet like her. And she was a good-looking female, right? فأتى سودة وهي تصنع الطيبة. So he went to his wife said Sauda, it's like specified here. He went to Sauda and she was working and she was making طيب, that is perfume. وعندها نساء, and there were other females with him. With her, with Sauda. فأخلينه فقضى حاجته. So they knew that the Prophet ﷺ came for his wife, Sauda, so they left. They left that place. And the Prophet ﷺ performed intercourse with her. This is explicit hadith, eh? Like the women are like, okay, we gotta go now. Right? ثم قال, the Prophet ﷺ didn't mention in accordance to this recension, أيما رجل, any man, who's this instruction for or guidance for? Us. It's for us. We're not supposed to hide it, not talk about it, only mention it like, once in a while. I promise you, even those people who are going through rigorous learning will assist them and give them more success. Even they might come across a narration like this, like maybe 1 or 2 days in their whole run of like 7-8 years, right? Like towards the end of it. And if they miss that day, if for some reason, let's say that they were late or they were not present, they were thinking about other stuff, or that happened to fall into the riwayah section or anything, they might miss out. At the same time, you're just like maybe they can't recall it, or it passively went and then it's been a while and it's too many narrations to cover. But alhamdulillah, we're here, we're discussing these. So don't always have negative feelings towards those people who don't know these narrations or who are not sharing them. The main thing is just look at it positively. We are covered. So the Prophet mentioned that whoever is a man and he sees a female, تعجبه, that he likes, فليقم إلى أهله, he should go to his wife. This is like protection from fitna, right? Or zina, more particularly. That don't approach that female. It is completely fine to be attracted to females. The Prophet ﷺ himself was attracted to females, even after marriage. Does that make sense? I said this in my first class. I'm like, brothers, even if you get married, that does not necessarily mean you're not going to be attracted to females anymore. You will be. You just have to channel it into or towards the right direction. The one that you have to bring in your desires, your ahwa, bi'ilm. You have to bring it in line with knowledge. The fact that Allah Ta'ala has told you or allowed you or instructed you or given you the green light to fulfill your desires. But in the right man, go to your wives, get married. Does that make sense? فإن معها مثل الذي معها. Because whatever she has it too. This is the hadith says. Whatever the woman that you saw, whatever she has, your wife's gonna have it too. This actually, what if someone says, my wife doesn't have whatever I saw? Right? But I told you before too, there's absolutely nothing wrong if you're prioritizing religiosity, but at the same time looking at the jamal as well. The first narration that we did, does that not tell you about physical attraction? هَلَّا جَارِيَةً تُلَاعِبُهَا. Then why not a younger female that you can be playfully intimate with? that has to do with the physicality. Does that make sense? So if a person is choosing his or her partner, it's completely fine for them to also look out for the fact that are they going to be physically attracted to them or not, so they're able to preserve their chastity in a better manner. Does that make sense? So the mithliya, whatever she has it too. If whatever is more attractive to you, it's fine for you to look for that, right? But obviously, as I said, that it shouldn't be something that there's a brother. I hope he's married. There's a brother that I used to know. I'm not in touch with him anymore. That brother was like in his 30s and he was not married. And I asked him like, why are you not married? That doesn't make sense because you're like, you get married. Why not? You know why he wasn't married? And he was like, I'm looking for someone who has a PhD. And I'm not joking. And she also has to be a Sayyida. And I swear it's not a joke. She has to be a Sayyida. She has to have a PhD. And she has to have some sort of link with some sheikh. And a couple of things. So we had a mutual friend. He goes, he's never gonna find me. He's never gonna find me. I met him a few years later, and then we talked. He's like, I'll actually took out some conditions. From that, I don't know where he's right now, but he's like, I was like, brother, you just get married. Why are you not married? I said, they live it's all Muslims. You don't have the issues that are in the West. It's sometimes hard to find females or males that have good potentials in the West, but you have a lot of people want to be. But it's just prereqs, especially PhD in the East. You're well, okay, sure. He's she has to be because he had a PhD too. She has to be on my level, and it has to be certain fields. I don't know what this brother was on, but hopefully he's married. Right? He's a good friend of mine. So, anyways, yeah. So, whatever the level is, just that kind of delay is definitely problematic. But if you are looking for, you have multiple suitors, and there's one that you are, as I said before too, and you would say that you were able to fulfill your haja in a better way, there's 100% nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Al-Ghazali is talking about it too, in case someone thinks that maybe it's not rectify your inner soul sort of understanding. It is 100%. Al-Ghazali mentions that if you have 4 wives and they're not able to fulfill your sexual desires, divorce all 4 of them and get other 4. He mentions this. I promise you. His views on women are too interesting, especially when it comes to the background that he's from, and you would imagine that he would be somewhere in the desert, sitting by himself and staying away from women. He's not doing that. So, yes. But anyways, وفي رواية لأحمد عن جابر فإذا رأى أحدكم امرأة فأعجبته فليأتي أهله فإن ذلك يرد مما في نفسه. That so if a man were to, there's another riwayah from Jabir. So there are multiple recensions and they come from different companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that if a man were to see a woman, it happens, it's wrong. It does not mean that you are on the lowest level of taqwa or something, especially with our surroundings. It's completely realistic and understandable that you're at your workplace and you saw someone and you were attracted to that someone, you're married, and you're just willing to get back home. So فإن ذلك يرد مما في نفسه. Is that because when he is married and he has a wife where he can actually go to, then whatever shahwa he's getting for the other female in his heart, that will go away. Does that make sense? Look at these narrations, they're beautiful. Alhamdulillah. And we'll conclude here and let's look at the questions. The link is in the Telegram channel, group for anonymous questions. So let me just quickly do those first. So what time does class begin today? And it was I don't have a reason to answer this anymore. It began at 7:10. Another question is, how do couples maintain the same level of intimacy in marriage after having kids and responsibilities increase? This is a really good question. And I think the responsibilities increase, especially when it comes to intimacy, from the female side a lot more, in a way that she's not able to be intimate as much as she wants, or wants, or as much as the husband wants her to be. So I think that the challenge is definitely greater, right? But at the same time, you can say that the man also feels that the challenges are definitely there. You just have to pick your poison. That's the best way to put it. You have to find good babysitters. Just being realistic, you have to find good babysitters, either from family or from outside, and you will have to find time for it. 100%. Find time for it. Also, there are many responsibilities, like the difficulties of intimacy that I've. I mean, this could be interpreted in different ways, but it's a very big question. It could be just be like, okay, when you have children, people's bodies change, women's bodies change, and then there's a possibility that that the intimacy levels are also affected by that, right? But it says responsibilities and kids are mentioned too. So I would say that the fact that they want to be intimate is what I'm understanding here, but they're not able to do that because of the fact that they have too many people around them or responsibilities to take care of. So you got to find like good babysitters. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And you got to find just time for yourselves. There's also the fact that you should not be anchored by cultural understandings that relate to intimacy in a way that takes a good part away from it, right? Like some people actually believe that intercourse or sexual intimacy is only restricted to the nights. That's not necessarily true. There are many narrations of the Prophet and his companions that show or tell us that they perform sexual intercourse during the day as well. Or at a time where you would interact with people. This last narration that we're talking about, the Prophet was actually with people. So that was a time when they were sitting together, right? And it was completely fine for that to happen. There's also other restrictions that come with like family members, as in like, well, if there are kids around, certain things cannot happen. If there are parents around or whoever they're living with, certain things cannot happen, etc. So you have to find like leeways, definitely. Book hotel rooms if you can afford them, find good babysitters, etc. But my point is like utilize everything possible, but you will have to accept the fact that you will have to make changes. You cannot expect the same level of or same routes to intimacy that you had when you first got. It's different. When you first got married, you got nothing to do. It's just temporary. You got nothing to do. It's two people, and this got nothing to do. So you're like very intimate, right? But for people who can keep things spiced up in a way that they go, like, okay, so we have like 2 children, right? So let's say that 2 of them are of that age to go to school. It's not like wrong for the wife, for example, to just meet up with her husband somewhere outside. This is straightforward. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you can find ways to be intimate for sure. Obviously, the expenses would increase, right? But then everyone's cases are different. But I'm pretty sure that there's something that can be done, right? There's no one solid, concrete answer to this because everyone's situation is different. Someone could be like, "Well, I don't have lunch breaks, so my lunch breaks are shorter," or whatever. But I promise you, there are people that I know, and they are a lot more intimate than they were before, or at least they're maintaining whatever intimacy that they were maintaining, even after having a bunch of children. It's just the timings are different, the situations are different, and possibly even certain performances are different. Just being really blunt, right? Like it's like whatever is, let's say how much. Like let's say someone being intimate, and there's a way to be intimate that takes longer for someone to reach a point when they be like, okay, now it's going to reach a point where it's going to conclude, right? That the whole process is longer. They can actually shorten the process by doing other things. They have to be more realistic. But there's no such thing that if you have children, then the intimacy dies. It just changes. So you should make time out of it, but if not the same level or other levels, and talk to each other. I think that's one of the main things. After having children, I would imagine like that would require that there has been some time, right? A long time. You understand each other's bodies a lot more. You understand each other's temperaments a lot more, and there is definitely a greater chance to reach a certain higher levels of intimacy in a different manner. And now, if you want to just talk to each other more, and it's completely fine. The other question is, does the wife have financial obligations to her kids? If not, the man. What about saving money? What if she wants to buy a thing and he insists on her saving first? Her money is supposed to be, if she's earning something or she has money and she has it saved, the husband does not have the right to spend that. However, there's a difference of opinion regarding her own spending done from her own money. So the Maliki view, which is pretty strong, I would say, is that there are certain restrictions that could be imposed by the husband if the spending is done in a way that he considers to be problematic. Right? There's a lot more details into it, but the vast majority of the scholars are of the view that the husband cannot control it, unless there is a very strong, inclination towards halak, like destroying your wealth, in which obviously because he is a wali, right? He has or like a qawwam makes more sense. He's a qawwam, like he's the one who's the caretaker of the family or like the head of the family, so he can actually definitely stop her from doing it. But her general spending is not controlled by the man. So if she's saving money, she can save money. There's no like obligation on her to spend that money differently. As for obligation to her own kids, if not the man, then there is obviously there is an obligation on the female to take care of that. If they come in the care of the husband, then the obligation comes to the husband as well. What if she wants to buy a thing and he insists on her saving first? Well, it depends on what thing it is and depends on what their goals are together. She can definitely buy it for her own money, and he might not be happy with it. You would have the discussion of like, well, what if I do things? It doesn't have to be about finances. What if I do things that makes my husband upset? We will go through certain narrations later on in which it's mentioned that one of the main duties that a female has is to keep her husband happy. So Islam is to. So we will look at that, inshallah. So it doesn't make sense to upset your husband. You gotta convince him to buy whatever thing I want to buy, right? But there's no actual obligation. Now, if the husband is saying that, well, you're saving first, but like, what is the reason why the saving is happening? If it's her own goal, for example, let's say that she has a goal. She goes like, husband, can you make this happen? He's like, yeah, sure. But he's like, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, right? He goes like, well, it makes sense that you contribute too, so we can both achieve that goal, right? For the betterment of both of us. She's like, yeah, okay. But in the middle, she all of a sudden she goes like, well, the new Jordans are out, and I want to get those, or like a new bags out, right? So it's working. So she goes like, well, okay, you know what? I have saved this much, so I'll spend that. But he goes like, well, if you're gonna spend on that bag, right? Technically, the obligation that, or sort of the target that we have for saving that money, that's gonna come out of my pocket later on, or at least I'm gonna feel it somehow. I'm gonna get the hit. So it doesn't make sense because you already made a plan. Like I had these finances to contribute with, and you had this, and now you're backing out from there because we mutually had a plan, and then that plan was going in a better way. So I kind of put my finances somewhere else because I knew that you had the other parts covered. So it's just a matter of like understanding. I would say it's not really a religious obligation for you. You can save your own money, obviously. I'm rewarded for spending on my co-wife in the same way I would for spending on my husband. Not in the same way. I would definitely say that spending on your husband would be more rewarding because of the fact that it comes in Hadith very directly. That the woman who spends on her husband will have two rewards: ajr al-qarada and ajr al-sadaqah. That she will have by spending on her husband, she will have the reward of being close to her husband and the reward of being close to Allah. That's how I'm interpreting it. Right? It's not the right translation, obviously. But if she is spending on her co-wife, who is also somehow related to her, somehow, like I wouldn't say this hadith directly would be applicable to her, but just as you spend on your cousins or your uncles, etc., and there is some sort of like kinship there, or there's some sort of relationship there, you will get rewarded for that. For the sadaqah, you will get rewarded, but I'm not sure if it can be said that as much as you spend it on your husband. That's like directly related to you, and the explicit narrations come for that as well. But you will definitely be rewarded if you were to spend on a co-wife. If you're sharing the responsibilities of your husband and relate to your co-wife, then you're simply spending on your husband, right? Like we discussed right now, like that when a woman is spending, and the husband is not able to fulfill certain obligations, that could actually be understood even in the context of a woman actually saying that, well, if he's getting married to a female, then and I'm holding on to these finances, I can still continue to do that. And let's say that he is able to afford the other side a lot more. It's completely fine. You understand what I'm saying? Let's say there's a man. He's married to a female. He's not able to fulfill her obligations because obligations are heftier. Right? Let's say that apartment that they're renting, it's like really expensive. Does that make sense? He goes, I cannot pay that. He goes, like, how much is it? It's like 2,500. So I can't pay that. He's got one wife. All of a sudden, there's another woman comes in his life, and she follows the hadith that we looked at. And especially the percentage of well, 10k. She should get married to that guy. She should not get a man to divorce his wife. She goes like, oh, I want to marry you. He's like, I'm already broke. I can't even afford one wife. She's like, well, guess what? You don't have to pay rent for me. She's like, okay. The first wife might get pissed off, and she might be like, it's not that you gotta pay rent, right? But it doesn't make sense though, because whatever was happening before, what happened before, this is just like a separate relationship. But if she's okay with it, she's okay. I would say that would be dependent on how okay she is with the relationship itself. And then it makes sense. I mean, you guys understand the context, right? It's like she continues to do whatever she's doing because what is being done is for not the co-wife. She's not supporting the co-wife now by paying the rent that she was already doing when there was no co-wife. She's supporting her husband. Does that make sense? What forms of birth control are allowed, recommended in Islam? If any, we will do birth control, inshallah, in future narrations explicitly. There are narrations that come and talk about it, certain forms of birth control, and we'll discuss that later, inshallah. See if there's no other questions on thing. Let's look here in the meeting itself. If there are any questions. Can you substantiate that through evidence? Which part? I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Well, where the female are more prone to fitna and emphasized for marriage. The emphasis that I'm talking about, being fitna itself, it comes explicit in the hadith, right? And the Quran too. Like it's an established fact that women have been called fitna. That explicitity is not really there for men. So it's understood from that aspect. As for emphasized for marriage, as I said, that fitna is trials that relate to every single obligation, right? So I'm just giving more context to it. It's not something that is directly related to it in a way that, well, that's the reason only. I said that that's the wisdom that could be understood here, or can possibly be. If you were to look at the framework itself, and you understand that, okay, this is how the gender roles are, and this is how the spending works, you see there are multiple factors that give you more context as to why such obligations exist, right? Does that make sense? Like there's an obligation, as we will discuss that in the sexual activities between the male and the female. There are certain more obligations related to the females. So yeah, you got to put that into context as well. Like you give everything like context, right? You go, okay, why is this happening? So a lot of times there's no direct signification that's present for the fact that, okay, it's actually emphasized, the fitna part of it is actually emphasized in marriage, but it is generally understood that fitna in all forms of their life, and that relates to the marriage too. So if you were to say, I would say that, for example, the takfur al-ashir part of this mention, right? The females will be more in the hellfire because of the fact that they are more ungrateful, or actually they are ungrateful to their husbands. So that tells you, because of the fact that you are talking about them in contrast to males, right? That tells you that in marriage itself, the trial is stronger. The trial, like in terms of dealing with females, as well as other things. I would also say that there are other narrations that come that talk about females being married off, right? Like the narrations, some of the essential narrations that come to من كانت عنده له ثلاث بنات أو أربع بنات, and then he mentions that there's a man who has 3 or 4 daughters and he makes them live a good life and then marries them off. There are some weak narrations that mention that a female should be married off as soon as possible, but I couldn't find anything like explicitly sound. But there are some weak narrations that support that idea too. But the main point I was making is that the fact that females are generally given the title of fitna, and there's no negativity in that, right? And just the fact that they are more prone to everything that would be classified as fitna, and following a desire is definitely part of it. And marriage itself is very strongly related to following your desires, and how it's one of the ways of preventing yourself in following your desires in the wrong way. So it makes sense that they are. It addresses them more strongly and more emphatically. Does that make sense? But not as explicitly as I would say an ayah or something that clearly mentioned that. But there are definitely other proofs for it, but they're very generic proofs. There's how come the woman is in the wrong if she chooses not to get married to the man who is not financially stable, given that it's a charity and not an obligation. When we establish that the woman is in the wrong if she chooses not to get married to the man who is not financially stable, given that it's a charity and not an obligation. Do you see that? So I believe it's referring to the fact that when I said that when there's a woman and she's looking at, yeah, okay, I understand what you're referring to. You're referring to like when I said that there's a woman and she sees that there's a man that she can be supportive in, she likes that man, and she can get married to that person. They're both going to be in the wrong, right? If they can actually do certain things that are, she's okay to actually just pass for whatever reason she's able to pass, but she can't really blame anyone except like, what's the wrong in that? I understand this. If she wants to get married, and she's like, the reason why I'm not getting married is because of the fact that he's not going to fulfill his obligation, right? The obligations are like his obligations. It's not your obligations. So she's actually able to get a marriage by doing certain things, and she's not doing it. So it's not the guy's fault, is what the point is. If you're not getting married because of the fact that you have certain things, even if they're obligations, if you're doing certain things that are even if they're obligations, like obligations and non-obligations don't really tell you whether something is considered to be wrong or right in terms of whether you choose to do or not. Does that make sense? Like if you were to say that, because you can easily let it go. Like the obligation part of it is only for how certain households can be maintained. When you see that you can maintain a household with the obligations regarded to by you, like from your end you can forego it, then why is it not being forego? Or is that why is the female not foregoing it if she is? So like I understand, like how is that her fault? Like because she's choosing not to get married when she can. Yeah. Like she's saying, okay, the scenario is that she wants to get married, but she can't. So why can't she get married? Is it because I'm choosing not to get married to this guy when I can't? Why are you not getting married to this guy? Is that because he's not going to fulfill his obligations? So that means, is he someone that should be getting married to or not? You can't have both, right? You can't be like, yeah, this guy is actually perfect. Only that, if he was fulfilling his obligations, it's like you have the solution to that. You have the solution to that. So if you stay unmarried because of that, if it's a matter of preference, it makes perfect sense. People are okay, not in this direction, but in the other direction. But if there is a scenario in which the female remains to be unmarried, that's no different from a guy who's not married because of certain obligations or certain things, obligations or not, that he's not letting go. Does that make sense? The reason why this is an obligation that can actually be be canceled out by the female is because of the fact that she can do that, isn't it? Let's say if a female actually said that you don't have to do that, it goes away. So she's choosing for it to remain, and then she's also complaining that why is she not married? That is what I mean. If it's a matter of preference, let's say for example she comes and she is getting married. I'm talking about this specific scenario where she remains unmarried because of the fact that she can actually get married and just let go of a few things, but she's not doing that. That's no different from someone saying that, well, he wants to get married and he hasn't been married for like a long time, and there's certain things that are just adjustable. Because the emphasis on getting married is a lot more than if there is any emphasis of like foregoing your right or not. Like it's completely fine. Like there is a constant emphasis on getting married, and there's absolutely nothing wrong in foregoing your rights. That makes sense. So like in conflict, what I am saying is that why would a person or a female, male, both sides, right now, why would a person choose to oppose that emphasis by just a personal choice? That's no different from someone who is saying that, well, the reason why I'm not married is because they have like higher standards. Like the obligation and non-obligation really isn't changing because the obligation is on the man, not the woman. Let's talk about it more, inshallah. If I wasn't clear. But, any other questions? No questions? Sorry? For going away? Yeah, there are situations to marry and think about that. It's not interesting the female for going away. I mean, over here, this narration itself shows that the obligation that she's spending on Abdullah, right? You can't imagine, like, it's kind of like going in a circle. If you were to say that he had the money and through which he was, fulfilling obligations, and then she would provide him money after that because that would just get directed towards him, spending on her. He was refused to get married because of obligation that had to do. Is that like something that happened to do? So the man had couldn't fulfill certain obligations with the female. Yeah. Like, was that ever a situation? I can't think of anything right now. The female asked for something to be done and the man couldn't do. Oh, what's obligated for a man to do? Yeah. He couldn't do it, but the female could have done it for him. So, for example, like he couldn't provide for it, but she could provide, but she didn't want to. She didn't want to. Yeah, like that's a normal case, right? Yeah, no, but like she just didn't want to get married. Like she could have, but she didn't want to. Like just from personal choice, like you said. Okay. Oh, that's fine, right? Yeah. No, I was just asking. It was like a case like that. This is similar to the question that was asked, right? As in, if a female is like, there's an obligation that is not being fulfilled by the male, and the woman does not want to get married to that person, that's completely fine. That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the female that remains unmarried because of that. Right? Everyone has like different situations. Going back to this question too, that she's asking him to uphold his obligation. How is that wrong? That's not the point I was making. That asking for an obligation will be considered to be wrong. I'm talking about a female that can get married. Yeah, so the example that, or the scenario that I had in mind was like when a female can get married and she wants to get married, but she wouldn't because of the fact that she wouldn't because she's waiting on the obligation to be fulfilled. Right? Like, you have to understand the construct here, right? And so what is the obligation that a man has? It's like, well, he has to provide for her. So, okay, that's when, like, it's like when they get married, and there are certain obligations that could be something that she can let go or not. So if a female, let's say that she is in a situation where she wants to get married, and there's a man she likes, and she's like, okay, you know what, I'm not gonna marry you because you're not able to fulfill obligation, but I can actually make you fulfill that obligation. Okay, let's put it like this, right? That makes sense? Isn't this like the same thing? Because if a person was to say, okay, your obligation is not there anymore. What's the obligation? Is like to provide this. So, okay, so I can help you provide this. That's the point of me. Is okay, you can actually facilitate your own marriage by allowing that obligation to be carried out by the men. It's not mandatory on the man to earn. You guys know that, right? It's not mandatory on him to earn and provide. Well, if she stays unmarried for personal preferences, that's when it's wrong, right? Like, so and she has the ability to cancel it on too. Like, the whole point is that you're supposed to get married, and certain obligations are connected to how you get married. So there are people who are actually finding those constructs, and there are people who are not able to find those. So anyone who is not able to find it, and there is a way the Sharia has provided for them, and guess what? You can actually ignore this and be married. What the Sharia is very emphatically asking you to do, then obviously, the blame will come towards that person that how come you're not doing it. It could be from either of the sides. Yes, we discussed this, right? Anyone, this is the crux of what we discussed before. Is that anyone who's actually choosing? I mean, we are having one in every single person that, well, you know what, they're not sick, right? But it's not normal from a legal perspective to remain unmarried, for sure, because everyone's at some point falling into sin for sure. I mean no disrespect by this, but like it's definitely only a rare case where this will not happen. That's why the emphasis comes with like command that everyone will go through a point, and we'll discuss it later too, inshallah, because it goes back to the discussion of if you guys are not seeing the question, it's like, so is it morally wrong or sinfully wrong to be a married man or woman? To remain married. I think that's the understanding that needs to be there. So, right, how much emphasis do we have on the fact that you're supposed to be married or you must be married is what will determine that what you can sacrifice. Like the obligations that we're looking at, and if you want to say the obligations that are being ignored by the man, it would make sense if you were to say that, well, there's absolutely nothing wrong if the woman stays unmarried if someone is not able to fulfill their obligations. But that would only make sense if remaining unmarried would be an okay choice, or like it's only better to get married. Does that make sense? But given the fact that, there could be a specific scenario in which you would say that well, this woman is kind of like in the middle, like she's not able to have like a show of that level. But I'm talking about like on our social level that we look at, everyone is open to or prone to sin. It's really easy to sin, right? And then marriage is becoming more and more difficult. So in that situation, the emphasis that comes, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for someone to remain unmarried when there's definitely easier routes for them to choose from. Does that make sense? It's no different from like saying that, well, people want to get married, but they want to have their families involved, and their families don't agree. So you got to get your families to agree too. It's like, yeah, but you can always oppose that, right? Like not the guardianship discussion, but like just the fact that that's like a hurdle that could be opposed. How do you do it? Allah knows. But that's something that there's an element that can be taken out. But it's an external thing that's making it problematic. So let's say that there's an obligation there too, hypothetically. So like in a nutshell, the point I'm making is that it's extremely emphatic or obligatory for males and females to get married. It is really difficult to imagine that someone was not married for a long period of time and they're not falling to sin. Some sort of sin, especially the ones that are looking. So the example that I gave was like she wants to get married to the guy, and the guy wants to get married to her too. And now the thing is that she's not able to fulfill that obligation, so they're waiting on that. It doesn't make sense for them to wait on that. Makes sense? Unless obviously there are like external factors, because everyone's situation is different, right? There's an external factor that, as I mentioned too, that the girl feels like, well, this guy's gonna be lacking big time later on, right? So it will make sense for me to, ensure this person is able to do that. If she's preferring one person over the other, there's absolutely no such thing as like, well, if she literally says that, okay, no, that will equal to a sin. because there's no commandment that's being opposed. I'm talking about the fact that what she's not doing, like there's no sin attached to it, obviously. The sin will be, well, what happens to her after she's not married for a long period of time. Then the fault will obviously be in the meaning of sin. But before that, it's as faulty as the guys that I mentioned that have like higher standards according to them, and they're not able to find a girl because of that. Right? None of the narrations that are present ever mention that those things cannot be looked. You can actually forego those things. These are the mention that you have to be married. Everyone's supposed to get married. We'll do more narration on that too, inshallah. Did I answer the question? I hope so. But that would be a standard case, though, right? The way I'm understanding it. Like a female has the right to seek separation because of that. Like, let's say hypothetically that one of the obligations is to fulfill the sexual rights of the female. She's married, so she can actually get a khulr based on that. But this comes from a society, like these concepts are coming from a society where everyone's getting married, back to back. Like all the narrations we see say, okay, comes in, okay, طلقها فلان, like this man divorced her, and then she got married to this guy. And then this man divorced her, and she got married to this guy. There are many examples of that in the time of the Prophet. But we kind of have an issue of when people are not getting married, or they take very long to. Either they get married like in their mid-20s or late 20s or early 30s, etc. While the prophetic instruction is okay. So if someone is not susceptible to sin, we can't establish an obligation for them to be married, which in turn means that they're not wrong to stay married, right? No, but like if there's a specific scenario that someone, no one's really infallible, right? So everyone goes through different levels of like how much they're attracted to different people and how much they can fall into sin. So if there's a person who is, everyone has like different levels. So according to the most popular view, there are different. There's like a spectrum. So you could be sometimes there is a state that a person is not mandatory on them to get married. So it's only mubah for them to get married. So this is applicable across the board. So let's say that there is a person who is married, right, and married, but he is, and the wife is fulfilling the sexual desires of the male, but his desires are more than that, and due to that, he's actually falling into sin. It is mandatory on him to get another wife. That's what Ghazali talks about when he's talking about maintaining your chastity. That are quoted, he actually mentions that you get a wife and then you don't put a burden on her more than she can fulfill. But you have a stronger desire, so you can fall into sin, so you get married to another female. And then if your desire is more than that, then you get married to another. So you go towards other females. But there's definitely situations in which a person could be such that they don't get married, because there is a difference of opinion regarding the obligation being interested in marriage and being applicable to every single person or not, right? Right? That's like understood. There are people of knowledge and they never got married. And that's because their understanding was that if you reach a temperament in a way that you focus on other forms of worship more, then it's completely fine to prefer that over marriage. But I'm talking about the general social construct of someone saying, well, we can't really prove anyone is sinning, but that's the thing. It will be dependent on that. Okay. It's hard to say that, yeah, everyone's a sinner. Well, yeah. Anyways, we'll stop here, inshallah. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
وتمت الأرجوزة المئية في ذكر حال أشرف البرية صلى عليه الله ربي وعلى صحابه وآله ومن تلا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد